What's up, YouTube? So in this video, I am finally doing my list of quarterbacks for the 2021 NFL draft class. I am doing a top 10, starting from the bottom, going to the top. Unless you were shocked that Peyton Ramsey isn't the number one. But anyway, Peyton Ramsey is going to be my number 10 quarterback. I've already done a video on him. I've done videos on all these guys on the list. So I do see him primarily as a backup quarterback. I do think he can be a decent day 3 guy. But I don't really see much more than that. Maybe like a low-level starter, like a Josh McCown type. My first two quarterbacks are kind of in that same boat. He is 6'2", about 220 pounds. His arm strength is pretty okay at best, but definitely nothing more than that, which is something that really limits him. He does have enough accuracy for a backup role. I just wouldn't necessarily want him to be like your starter. I do think he is a day 3 guy, because typically if you're going to have an actual backup quarterback, you're probably going to take him on day 3. Because, I don't see this guy as being someone who's going to develop into being your starter. I see this guy as just a backup, maybe like a journeyman starter at best. He can move a little bit. He does have a little bit of athleticism. Honestly, Josh McCown is probably actually a pretty good comp for him, even though I don't like doing player comps. But, yeah. And his mechanics are pretty okay as well. He's pretty decent for being number 10 on the list. I mean, typically, your 9, 10, 8 quarterbacks in any draft class are pretty much going to be backups for the most part if they make a team. Really, it's the top 6 guys that, at least in this class, that are really worth talking about. But we'll get there. So, number 9, Shane Buchel, quarterback out of SMU. So, kind of similar to Peyton Ramsey. Limited arm strength, but I would say that Peyton Ramsey does kind of beat him athletically. And I think their accuracy is probably comparable. Buchel might have a little bit of an edge on him. And he is quite small. He is 6'1", about 207 pounds, so people are definitely going to question his size. But where I do think he does edge him out, I think he's a little bit better at throwing with touch, and I also think he's better at looking off defenders. And overall, I think his reads are better than Peyton Ramsey's. I do see him as another either journeyman, low-level starter, or a backup quarterback. I think both of them can be consistent backup quarterbacks for a long time. So, hey, you need them. You need them in this league. Not every team's got one. So, hey, there you go. So yeah. Both of those quarterbacks are pretty much backup roles for me. And that's really going to be about it. So, yeah, let's, Felix Franks, quarterback out of Arkansas / Florida. So obviously he is someone who transferred from Florida after Kyle Trask took the spot after Felix Franks had an ankle injury in 2019. And I think these next two quarterbacks are actually fairly similar. And honestly, I kind of had a hard time ranking them, like, better or worse than each other. I think they're kind of on par, really. I think they are both people with the size and arm strength that you want in the NFL. And maybe could develop, but they need to get more consistent with their accuracy. They need to get more consistent with their reads. Stop taking hits they don't need to, stuff like that. So, Felix Franks to start. He can buy a little bit of time, and he can move a little bit, but I wouldn't necessarily say that his athleticism is his strength. It's pretty average as far as that goes. Obviously, he's got the size. He's 6'6" and 228 pounds. So, teams are going to look at that and probably overrate that because they do typically look at size when it comes to quarterbacks. His mechanics could be a little bit more consistent as well. That's what kind of throws off his accuracy. I know his, completion percentage is pretty good, but when you actually look at the film, the throws that aren't like screens and stuff, it gets a little bit shaky. And even though a lot of them are completed, he puts them, his ball placement on some of those throws just isn't that good. But again, if he can fix his mechanics, I think that would help a lot. You can tell that is what's throwing him off. So I think it is coachable where he can improve it. So maybe if he can get into the right system and develop for a couple years, he might be able to be something. But because like I said, he definitely does have the arm strength, and his accuracy does show flashes. He does have flashes of accuracy. I will say that. Decision making really needs to improve too, and mainly him taking hits that he doesn't have to. That's going to get him injured. That's going to cause fumbles and turnovers. His feet get narrow sometimes, and that really throws off his accuracy. You see that with a lot of people who have really strong arms. Because people with like weaker arms, like let's say Shane Buchel and Peyton Ramsey, right? They don't have as much arm strength as Felipe Franks does. So they have to have a perfect base when they throw to generate as much force as they can into their throws. The thing with Felipe Franks is he doesn't need to do that because his arm strength is so far superior to theirs, so he can still have his base narrow and still have the arm strength. But the issue is with that is it also throws off your accuracy. That wide base is for accuracy and arm strength. You see that with a lot of strong arm quarterbacks, particularly ones that are tall like him. So that's something I would like to see improve. He can throw on the move fairly effectively, and he also he kind of reads the field kind of slowly, which kind of hurts him too. But overall, I do see him as someone who could possibly develop into being a starter in the NFL, but I definitely do not think he's ready right now. To me, he is a day 2 quarterback. So, yeah. Anyway, next on the list, Jamie Newman. He did technically transfer to Georgia this year, and I was really excited to see him at Georgia, but he ended up opting out due to COVID. So that is a little bit disappointing. And like I said, him and Felipe Franks, I think, are like right there with each other, honestly, as potential guys who have the arm strength and size to potentially develop into something more, but I don't think they're ready right now. So he is 6'4" and 230 pounds. So like I said, he definitely does have the size you want. And he does have some power to him. He is a little bit better of an athlete than Felipe Franks is. And he will use that size to try to run through you as well. He's got pretty good balance when he does it. He's actually a pretty patient runner as well. They typically did some like slower quarterback draws with him, which was kind of interesting. But similar to Felipe Franks, he does have a bad tendency of holding the ball a little bit too long. That's something I would like to see him improve on because he's going to take more hits than he needs to, especially when he's already a mobile quarterback. He also needs to learn when to not throw bullets because he does show flashes of being able to throw a touch. He just doesn't do it consistently enough. And sometimes he throws bullets when he really doesn't have to. Like when there's a receiver like 5 yards away from him, wide open, he's still throwing bullets all the time. And that's just really hard to catch. Plus, when you throw a bullet, your accuracy has to be absolutely perfect because it doesn't give your receiver time to react to it. So, like, if you throw it with touch, the ball will actually have some air time, and the receiver has some time to be able to adapt to where it's going, to its flight path, and get there. But when it's a bullet, it has to be perfectly accurate. Your receiver really can't help you. So that's something I would like to see him improve. His pocket presence isn't that great either. That's something I definitely want to see him develop. Unfortunately, that's something that only comes with experience. I really wish he had played this year because I think him having a senior year at Georgia would have been really good. Get him away from Wake Forest. But it really seems like most of the people who opted out are the people who really shouldn't have, besides like Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is fine. But and like I said, his arm strength, he has all the arm strength that you need. He has plenty of arm strength. He shows that in bunches. His accuracy, kind of like Felipe Franks, he shows flashes of it, but it's just not consistent enough for me. I do think he goes through his reads a little bit better than Felipe Franks does. It's still something he needs to work on, but he does do it a little bit better. If you are going to use him, he really seems to like timing-based routes, so keep that in mind. And he really likes to go for the deep ball as well. He likes to show off that arm. Even though he is athletic, he is a pass-first quarterback, which is something I like to see. And I do think, similar again to Felipe Franks, he has the same issue where he has really good arm strength, so he gets his base a little too narrow. So I'd like to see him work on that as well. But overall, I do like him. I definitely do like him as a prospect. And honestly, the only reason I really have him above Felipe Franks, because I think as quarterbacks, they're pretty similar. Jamie Newman's athleticism just barely edged him out, because I had to think of something to put one over the other, and the athleticism kind of pointed Jamie Newman to being slightly better. So, yeah. Okay, moving on. My number 6 quarterback, Kyle Trask. I do see him as a guy who could start for you. I do see him as more of a late first, early second type of quarterback. So he's not very athletic at all. Florida does like to do QB draws with him just because he's big and he can run some people over. He's 6'5" and 240 pounds, but he's not gonna like impress you as far as athleticism goes. But he does know how to buy a little bit of time, and he can run you over. He does have some pretty long legs as well. That's one of the first things I noticed. So, there's that. He definitely has made NFL caliber throws, which is something I like to see. And Florida lets him read the entire field, which is something that some colleges don't let him do. Like, you can actually see his eyes scanning the entire field. And he also knows how to lead people off with his eyes very effectively, which is something I love. Footwork is pretty solid. He has enough arm strength to succeed. It's not elite arm strength by any means, but he has enough to get the job done. Mechanics are pretty solid. He has shown the ability to throw a touch, and I think his accuracy is pretty solid for the most part, too. The issue with Kyle Trask is his decision-making sometimes. He does read the whole field, but sometimes his decision-making is definitely inconsistent. That's something that really, really needs to improve. And he also has a tendency to mistake the type of throw that he needs to make. That's something I noticed right away, too. Like, he has shown the ability. He can throw with bullets. He can throw back shoulder. He can throw with touch. He can do all those things. But sometimes he'll throw a bullet when he needed to throw with touch. And then sometimes he'll throw with touch when he really needed to throw a bullet to squeeze it into a tight window. So that's something I want to see him improve on in the league. And honestly, he just hasn't had that much time to start throughout his career. I mean, he was a backup in college and high school. So he's really only had about a year and a half as a starting quarterback in his entire career. So I would like to see him sit behind a veteran quarterback for a year or so to kind of improve on that decision making, see what that quarterback sees and stuff like that. I think that would really benefit him a lot because I do think he does have potential. He has a lot of tools already. He just needs to continue to develop them. And I think if you had to start Kyle Trask right now, I think you would be okay. So that's what puts him above some of the others. Okay. So my next quarterback, Trey Lance, quarterback out of North Dakota State. I know a lot of people are probably going to be kind of surprised by this because most people are putting him above Mac Jones. I am not. I do think he has a higher ceiling than Mac Jones, but I think Mac Jones is a little bit more NFL ready. That's my thing. So, Trey Lance's footwork is pretty solid. He has electric arm strength for sure. His athleticism and arm strength is really, really up there. Honestly, Justin Fields is the only one that might beat him with both things. And he's also a pretty patient runner, kind of like I mentioned with Jamie Newman. He can make you miss and run you over, so his athleticism is definitely something I love. He is 6'4", about 226 pounds. He does take more hits than I would like. He needs to learn to throw the ball away and slide, get out of bounds. He really needs to work on those things because I'm not trying to see him get hurt. And, of course, one thing that is going to be mentioned is he did play for North Dakota State, so competition level is a problem for sure. I can't really do anything about that, unfortunately. And he also didn't play this year besides one game because North Dakota State and most of D2 just decided not to play because of COVID. So that just is what it is. I wish there would have been a combine because he would have lit the combine up with his arm strength and athleticism. He would have been like one of the people being talked about. He does throw the ball well on the move. He has really good balance, which is something I love to see, especially as a mobile quarterback. But I do think that he definitely does have some issues. I think his accuracy really could improve, and a lot of that comes down to his mechanics could be more consistent. And I think his decision-making could really improve as well. And that's kind of why I do have him where I have him. I think Mac Jones is a little bit better with accuracy and decision-making than Trey Lance. Now, with the athleticism and arm strength that Trey Lance has, I do think he has a much higher ceiling than Mac Jones. But I think Mac Jones is more ready to go right now. So, hence why the placement. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and move to the next quarterback on the list. Like I said, Mac Jones. I do think that he is ready to go right now. I think Trey Lance would probably be better suited to sit a year or two and develop those skills. But I do think that Mac Jones is ready to play right now. He is more of a pocket passer, but he can move a little bit. He definitely doesn't have the athleticism that Trey Lance has at all. If you do end up having to start him, he really does well with play action with a good run game. He steps up in the pocket very consistently. His pocket presence is possibly better than anybody in this class, to be honest, besides maybe one. And I'll get to that later. So that's something I absolutely love. Like I said, he's not that athletic, but he can definitely buy time just in the pocket. His mechanics are solid. His feet are consistent. He can throw with touch. He can throw with velocity. Now, his arm strength isn't amazing, especially as far as like long ball goes. But if he needs to throw it into a tight window, he can definitely do that. And unlike Kyle Trask, he knows when to do each type of throw, if that makes sense. Like, he knows when to throw a touch and he knows when to throw a bullet. That's something that kind of trips Kyle Trask up. It's not a problem for Mac Jones. He surveys the field very, very well. And I know a lot of people are going to say he has a lot of help at Alabama, which is true. He has a great offensive line, great weapons. But the same could be said about Tua, and I didn't really hold it against Tua, so I'm not going to hold it against Mac Jones. So, But it is something to mention. And he has shown the ability to make NFL caliber throws, throwing into tight windows consistently. He can throw on the move a little bit, even though, like I said, he isn't that athletic, but he is capable of doing it. Now, one thing I will say is he does have a tendency, kind of like a lot of these guys, of holding the ball a little bit too long and taking sacks he doesn't need to. And he isn't going to have the same amount of time he had at Alabama, that is for sure. But that's just something he's going to have to deal with in the league, learning to deal with that stuff. But I think with his pocket presence, I think he'll be fine. I think he can be like a mid-level starting quarterback in this league, kind of like a Kirk Cousins type deal, something around there. So, yeah. Let's move on. Justin Fields. Powerful as hell. He is 6'3", 228 pounds. I don't think anyone is surprised to see him be the number 3 quarterback. I think that is the consensus of most people. Some people are putting Trey Lance or Mac Jones above him. I think that's kind of crazy. To me, I think at least as far as who the top 3 quarterbacks are, it was pretty obvious to me. It's just where to rank them amongst each other. Now, Justin Fields, to me, is clearly slightly below the other 2, but we'll get to that in a moment. Also, some people flip-flop him and Zach Wilson. I definitely think that Zach Wilson is better, but we'll talk about him in a minute. So like I said, powerful as hell. Probably the most athletic quarterback out of this top 10. Him and Trey Lance, it'd be between the two of them. And also, Trevor Lawrence can move too. But I'd probably give it to Justin Fields. Great at escaping. Very, very good at throwing the football on the move. He can make you miss. He can run you over. He can do all those things. He has all the arm strength you could need. And unlike people like Felipe Franks and Jamie Newman, he actually has the accuracy to match that. And he is a real threat with his legs for sure. And he's not afraid to attack you at all. He has a really good deep ball that he loves to exploit with that strong arm. And he's just very good with it. He's extremely accurate with the football. Possibly the most accurate quarterback in this class, which is really crazy considering the athleticism and the arm strength. He can throw with touch as well. Mechanics are pretty consistent. But the issue with him is really his decision making. That's what kind of sets him below the other 2 for me. He has a tendency to hold the ball, again, like I've been saying about a lot of these quarterbacks, he holds the ball a little bit too long. And he has a tendency to play hero ball. If you're really familiar with my channel, you'll know that term well, where he just tries to do a little bit too much and puts his team in a bad situation. You can get away with that a lot more in college than you can in the NFL. That's going to lead to turnovers, injuries, and all that. So I'd like to see him chill on that. It's one thing if you're like losing in the 4th quarter or something like that and you do that, but when you're up by 7 in the 1st quarter, you don't need to be doing all that. Just take what they give you. And I do think he needs to learn to throw the ball away a little bit more consistently. And overall, I think he needs to learn to read the field a little bit better. I do think he is ready to start right now. But I think if he was to sit under a veteran, it could help. I think his mental processing, it is there. It just needs to develop a little bit more. But overall, I do really like him as a prospect. So. Okay, so one last trait is something that him and the next quarterback both share. When they get stuck in a situation, they both have a tendency to try to run to get out of it. And by saying that, you probably know exactly what quarterback I'm talking about. Here it is. This is probably my most controversial take on this list. Trevor Lawrence being number 2, Zach Wilson being number 1. So, I do think that they are both amazing quarterbacks. All 3 of the top 3 quarterbacks are fantastic. I just think that Zach is a little bit more NFL ready. They all have their flaws. That none of them are perfect. But I'll get into it. I'll get into why I prefer Zach in a moment. So Trevor Lawrence, he is 6'6", 220 pounds. He has been the golden child for the last couple of years in college. I do think he's probably going to get taken first overall by the Jaguars, even though I do think that Zach Wilson is a little bit better. Trevor Lawrence can really hurt you with his legs. His arm strength is electric. Great at extending plays. He can throw a touch really effectively. He can throw velocity very effectively. He has some strength to him. He has speed to him. He can run you over. He can juke you out. He can do all those things. He's very confident. He trusts his arm. He can throw into tight windows. He's shown that on a regular basis. Very, very accurate. If you do draft him, he likes to use RPOs and read options, so implement that into your offense. He has a really quick release, which is awesome. Mechanics are solid as hell. Let's see. But the issues with him, really, for me, are his decision-making. Kind of similar to Justin Fields, like I said, he tends to run when he gets stuck on a play. And he also has a tendency to stare down receivers a little bit too much. And that is the main thing that really limits him. Let me not say limits him, because that's not the right word. It's what puts him down one for me and puts Zach Wilson above him. And he also holds the ball a little bit too much, and he's going to take hits that he doesn't need to. And one thing I do think that him and Zach Wilson will share is they both trust their arms so much that it is going to lead to interceptions in the NFL for sure. But you'll just kind of take that because they're both gunslingers, and they're going to come out on top most of the time with those. So it is what it is, but it is something to note that they are going to get interceptions by trusting their arm too much. But I do think that Trevor Lawrence needs to learn to throw the ball away a little bit more. He tries to make something out of nothing a little bit too much, which is great in like the fourth quarter or like clutch situations, but you don't need to be doing that all the time. You can really set your team back that way. His mental processing is really solid, but I do think it does need some development a little bit. And that's just something that's going to come with experience. I definitely think he's ready to go right now, because I think the mental processing he needs is stuff that he needs to learn on the field as a starter. So I do think he does need to be a day one starter to develop those skills. And it's not like his mental processing is bad. It's just not as good as Zach Wilson's, in my opinion. So with that, let's get to Zach Wilson. He is my quarterback number 1. I've been thinking about this for a long time. Quarterback is the position I started with in this class, at least heavily. I started off watching some of the opt-out guys. So I think Jamie Newman was probably the first player I watched. But the more I've watched these quarterbacks, and it's not just the first time when I made these videos, I went back and looked at them. Like, if you heard my Felix Franks opinion then, you probably wouldn't have guessed that he'd be in my top 10. So I have been rewatching film as I've been going to. So the more I've thought about it, the more that this makes sense to me. So similar to Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson does have a quick release. He's not quite as big. He's 6'3", about 210 pounds. I wouldn't mind him gaining a little bit of weight, but I don't really think it's an issue. He has a quick release, like I said. He's got a great arm, right up there with the others. He can extend plays very effectively. He's not as athletic as Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, but he definitely has enough athleticism to get the job done. He can hurt you with his legs, and he can definitely throw well on the move. It's just that the other two are a little bit faster than him. He's very, very confident, and he actually has a little bit of wiggle to him. He can make people miss a little bit more. a little bit more than expected anyway. Very, very comfortable in the pocket. He steps up into the pocket similar to Mac Jones. I do think that Mac Jones is better at it than him, but Zach Wilson does show that ability too. He throws very well on the move, like I said. He surveys the field extremely well. I think that Mac Jones and him are the best two at reading a defense in this class. He throws the ball very accurately into tight windows, and he makes NFL caliber throws all the time. He will throw, and unlike Trevor Lawrence, he will throw the ball away when needed, and that is an important trait to have. He'll get out of bounds to not take unnecessary hits, which is something that none of these quarterbacks had. He slides really well. Also, one thing I didn't forget to mention is Justin Fields also has a pretty good slide. He needs to do it more, but he does have a good slide. I did forget to mention that. But I'll give him that. But I do think that Zach Wilson does protect himself a little bit better than really any of these quarterbacks besides Mac Jones. And he will throw guys open as well, which is something that the other guys don't really have either. I think his anticipation is better than anybody on this list. And like I said, similarly to Trevor Lawrence, he does trust his arm so much that it is going to lead to interceptions. That just kind of is what it is. It comes with having a top-tier gunslinger. But like I said, I do think he's gonna come out on top more often than not. And one thing I will say, like a lot of them, he does have a tendency to hold the ball a little bit too long sometimes. He does show the ability to throw the ball away and slide and get out of bounds. But sometimes he does hold the ball a little bit too long and take sacks. He doesn't need to. But that's something that a lot of young quarterbacks struggle with. So like I said, none of these quarterbacks are absolutely perfect. But I do think that Zach Wilson's mental processing is what just puts him slightly above Trevor Lawrence to me. I just think he's a little bit more NFL ready. Now, let me get this clear. I think both of them are absolutely amazing. And if you are a quarterback-needy team, I don't think you'll be wrong for drafting either one. If you can build around them properly, you're going to have a great quarterback. Now, if you don't get them an O-line, you don't get them receivers, yeah, they're gonna struggle. Every quarterback needs help at the next level. Just is what it is. So, yeah. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this video. If you liked it, I'd appreciate hitting that like button. If you have any questions or comments, leave in the comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.